My name is Dr. Maxwell Jen. I'm the Medical Director of OMI Medical Group, an anti-aging and aesthetics practice here in Orange County, California. Today we'll be talking about one of the things that I absolutely hate the most. It makes my job really tough. It makes my patients' results really tough to get, and that is the sunlight. So sunlight actually is composed of lots of different types of light, but the ones that are most important to us when we're talking about protecting your skin and maintaining healthy skin is UVA, UVB, and HEV. So UV and UVB stands for ultraviolet light type A and ultraviolet light type B. HEV is relatively new and stands for high energy visible light, or rather not new, but newly understood. High energy visible light. Right now it's just a subject of a lot more research, so it's a really exciting time in understanding these sorts of lights. Well, we'll start with the classics, UVA and UVB. So UVA is, compared to UVB, has a longer wavelength, it penetrates more deeply, but is actually of lower energy. UVB, in contrast, has a shorter wavelength, has a much more higher energy, but also doesn't penetrate quite as deeply. 95% of the light that reaches the surface of the Earth is actually going to be of UVA, and the remaining 5% is of UVB. The effects of UVA and UVB are quite similar, so both of them are going to cause premature aging of the skin, tanning of the skin blemishes, and then also increase your risk for skin cancer. The main difference is that UVB, like I said, is more high energy, so UVB is going to be more responsible for sunburns, turning the surface of your skin red, causing that pain, causing that first-degree burn. HEV, on the other hand, like I said, is relatively new. It's the high energy visible light are given off from your smartphones, your computer screens, basically all the screens that permeate the modern world. What does this do? Primarily, the research has shown already that it can cause eye damage, cause macular degeneration, formation of cataracts. There's a Harvard paper that gained a lot of popularity saying that high energy visible light can interfere with your sleep patterns and give you poor quality sleep if you're exposed to too much of it. And now there's even some research suggesting that HEV can cause oxidative stress on your skin, and enough oxidative stress will eventually cause DNA damage, collagen destruction, and of course premature aging of the skin. Still an area of intense research, but a very interesting field nonetheless. So because my practice is in Southern California, I get a lot of patients coming in with signs and symptoms of sun damage, and frequently the patient doesn't even know that the thing that they're complaining about is actually a result of sun damage. So if the skin is a little bit too red, it's a little bit sensitive, you have the little red lines coming up, that could be a sign of sun damage. If your complexion isn't as good, you're looking kind of gray, little spots are popping up on your face, that is also signs of sun damage. Or my favorite one is when a patient says to me, it's like, hey, my friend who's the same age as me seems like they're aging really gracefully, and I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my god, what's going on over here? That's premature aging, and that is also potential signs of sun damage. One of the things that can also be incredibly frustrating is the patient and I will come up with a plan, we'll do an incredible treatment, they're happy, they're beautiful for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but a year and a half later they'll come back and they'll start asking, saying, hey, the results are starting to fade a lot faster than we expected, what's going on? And one of the first questions I'm going to ask them is, how much sun exposure have you been getting? Have you been protecting yourself properly? Because the sunlight will frequently undo a lot of the skin health and anti-aging treatments that we've accomplished here in the clinic. So always really important to beware the sunlight and protect yourself from the sunlight. So there are a lot of different ways to protect yourself from the sunlight. Sunscreen being the most obvious, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to talk about some of the other ways that people have come into my clinic saying, I don't need to wear sunscreen because I do this. So one of the most common ones is, I wear a hat all the time. But it turns out that while some hats are really good at protecting your face and your skin from the sun, others are not quite so good, and it's really important for you to figure out whether or not what you're doing is going to be effective. So the first thing is you want to make sure that your hat is of the correct size and the correct shape. So if you're wearing, for instance, a baseball cap, the rim is in the front, and it does a relatively decent job of covering your nose and your forehead. Depending on how long the brim is, it may not get your lower face, it may or may not get your ears, and it's definitely not protecting the skin of your neck, which is another area that's very prone to burning just because of how exposed it is. If you've got a very wide-brimmed hat, that does a little bit better. There's also the Legionnaires hat, which is a baseball cap, but you also have the fabrics on the side protecting the skin of your neck and also of your ears. It looks a little funny though unless you're in the Sahara, so most people are not wearing those types of hats. The other thing to consider is whether or not your hat is made of the proper material. So the materials you have determines the level of sun protection that your hat is actually providing you. In the US, there is a very handy dandy kind of a scale called UPF, or ultraviolet protection factor, which grades fabrics on how well they protect the sun. For instance, UPF of 50 means that it's going to block out somewhere between 97 to 98% of the UV rays that are hitting your body. Right? So here at OMI, one of the things that we provide is also something like a visor for our post-treatment patients. So this is UPF 50, and it is specifically designed to protect the face because most of the times we are just treating the face. So while it's really wonderful for the forehead, the nose, the lower face, right? Because that's exactly what we're treating. Again, this by itself is not going to be sufficient to protecting the ears or the neck. So we frequently encourage our patients to do other things in addition to just wearing this. So now you're interested in investing in the right type of sunscreen for you. But there's literally hundreds of different types of sunscreens with varying products and varying claims. How do you figure out what the best type is for you? Well, it turns out that there's basically two main types of sunscreen. You've got your physical sunscreens and your chemical sunscreens. So the first type of sunscreen that we'll talk about is your so-called physical sunscreens, also known as mineral sunscreens or inorganic sunscreens. So physical sunscreens do exactly what their name suggests. It's a physical barrier on the skin that blocks the UV rays from reaching your skin. Generally, these are made of two different types of ingredients, at least the ones found in the United States. So one is your titanium dioxide, the other one is your zinc oxide. And titanium and zinc are both minerals, hence the name mineral sunscreen. And the benefits of both of these is that they're not absorbed into the skin. They sit right on the surface of the skin. They're very inert, so they're very good for people with skin sensitivities or if you've recently had any sort of skin treatment because none of it is absorbed. The downside, if you can call it a downside to some of these sunscreens, is that they can feel a little bit chalky, they can look a little bit more white in color depending on the tint of the sunscreen, and it can seem like they can streak across your skin. So they're a little bit less aesthetically pleasing and they may not feel quite as smooth. Contrast that with your chemical sunscreens. So chemical sunscreens, also known as organic sunscreens, these sunscreens are absorbed into your skin, and they're going to absorb any of the UV light that makes it out of the atmosphere into your skin. And so rather than your DNA absorbing that UV light, rather than your collagen absorbing your UV light, that sunscreen instead is going to take the hit. The downside of that is that because it's absorbed into your skin, individuals who have sensitive skin or red skin or diseased skin or whatnot may have a harder time tolerating those sorts of sunscreen. My patients who comes in and says to me, I tried sunscreen and I get a really bad rash with it or it makes my skin burn, you're probably using a chemical sunscreen when you should in fact be using a physical sunscreen. Now, why would you use chemical sunscreen then? Because it absorbs, it's much smoother, it doesn't leave the streakiness, so aesthetically it's a little bit more pleasing. So your chemical sunscreens generally have, at least in the United States, one of these 6 different sorts of ingredients. That's a way you can tell whether or not you're using a true chemical sunscreen. So the ingredients are oxybenzone, avobenzone, octisalate, octocrylene, homosalate, and also octinoxate. If you still have any questions about what sunscreen is right for you, you can always come into our office for a consultation if you're local, and we can figure out which one is best for you and your needs and the demands in your life. Otherwise, you can also leave your questions down in the comments below, and we'll make another video answering a lot of those questions, especially the most commonly asked questions.